Hi you guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Grace, and previously my channel was all about my life living overseas and the travels that I did, but ever since the pandemic, I have gotten married, and now I am a mom of twin babies, and so my channel has kind of morphed a little bit into that, but there's still some adventure. So if any of that sounds like your cup of tea, I would so appreciate if you would consider subscribing, and if you are returning, welcome back. I'm so thankful that you're here. So, first off, let me just say, my room that I'm in right now is so hot. I don't understand why it's so hot. So if I start to glow a little bit more, it's not a makeup glow. It is sweat. Okay? So, just wanted to get that out of the way. So, today's video I'm really excited about. I have been wanting to talk about this for 6 months, because literally yesterday was 6 months since I gave birth to my twins. So this video I'm going to be talking about my entire birthing experience. It might be a little bit longer of a video, so hopefully it will keep you interested and entertained. If you are coming up on giving birth, especially if you're a first-time mama, you're probably like me, and I watched so many videos like this, which is great. That is a fantastic place to start. Everybody's birthing experience is going to be different, so I think it's really good to watch a bunch of these type of videos so that you kind of have an idea of what might happen, no matter what twists or turns it might take. For me in particular, I had a scheduled C-section. So, you might not want to have a C-section. You might want to go all natural or whatever, or have a birthing center or birth at home or whatever, but I think it's good to educate yourself on C-sections because there's always a possibility that it might turn into an emergency C-section, and even if that is not your desire or your birth plan necessarily, I think it's good to educate yourself to be prepared for if that might happen. So, I think it's good to watch this, even if that's not what you're planning. If you happen to be pregnant with multiples, then your likelihood of having a C-section goes up quite a bit. It doesn't have to, you don't have to have a C-section, but the likelihood does go up. So, yeah, I hope that you find this educational. I am going to go through like moment by moment with you and tell you all of the things that might happen, and I'm going to give you the straight poop when it comes to like the pain, and I had to ask some really awkward questions because you guys, I thankfully I have been very blessed that I haven't spent a whole lot of time in hospitals previously to pregnancy, so like surgery kind of things is all new to me. So I did have to ask some kind of stupid questions. So I asked them so you don't have to, okay? And yeah, you don't have to feel stupid because I asked some dumb questions. So yeah, I guess we'll just get right into it. Sorry that introduction was a little bit long. So the reason why I had a scheduled C-section, from my very first OB appointment, my OB told me that he usually tells his multiple mamas that it's like an 80% chance that it's going to end in a C-section. So I was kind of always prepared for that. And to be honest, I wasn't that upset about it. My mom had 3 C-sections. My sister had a C-section, and my sister-in-law had a C-section. So I feel like I was very knowledgeable already on C-sections, so it wasn't that big of a deal. I probably could have fought a little bit to try and go natural for at least part of it. But sometimes with multiples, you might give birth to baby A naturally, and then baby B has to be an emergency C-section, and I really didn't want that to happen. And my baby B, she was breech and transverse for pretty much the entire pregnancy, and she was higher risk. They were worried about her for a big chunk of the pregnancy, so because of all that, I didn't really want to risk her being in danger or having to have an emergency C-section for her. So I just opted for a scheduled C-section, and I was okay with that. So at my appointment at the end of my 35th week is when my OB was like, okay, I think it's time to schedule this. And so, yeah, I was like, okay, let's do this. So your OB office or your midwife or whatever, if they decide that you need to have a scheduled C-section, they should handle all of that for you. They call the hospital, they make the schedule, and then they'll call you and tell you when it is. My doctor always wanted to get me to at least 37 weeks because that's full term with twins, 37 or 38. But because my little one, baby B, was a little bit higher risk, he just decided to go with 37. So they scheduled me for 37 weeks and 1 day, which was a Monday morning. Now, here's your first tip. I did not know this, so thankfully this worked out in my favor. But going forward, it's nice to ask your office to ask the hospital if you can have a C-section as early in the day as possible. So 7 a.m. was when mine was scheduled, which was the very first scheduled C-section of the day. This is nice for 2 reasons. First off, hospitals tend to get backed up because sometimes procedures take longer than they anticipated, or a doctor gets held up, or an emergency C-section, or something comes in that pushes it back. Obviously, if you are a scheduled C-section, you are not going to take priority over an emergency C-section. So you might get pushed back if emergency C-sections have to happen. And that's exactly what happened to my sister. She had a C-section scheduled for 12 noon, and hers just kept getting pushed back and pushed back throughout the day. So she didn't end up having her C-section until 5 p.m. that day, which not only is that just a bummer, and you want to get it over with and you're nervous and you want to meet your baby, but also you are not allowed to eat 8 hours before your C-section. I don't know the exact reason why. Y'all, I am not a medical professional, so whatever I tried to describe to you might not be 100% accurate, but it is what I understand to be true, so I'm not trying to lead anyone astray if I say something wrong. If I do say something wrong, you can kindly correct me in the comments. But I think it has to do with surgeries. With a C-section, you are awake, unless, something can go wrong and they might have to put you under really quickly, under anesthesia. And I think it's something about like anesthesia can cause people to get nauseous and throw up. And obviously they don't want you to do that while they're working on your abdomen and all that and you're laying down. So they want your stomach to be empty if you happen to have all that happen. I think that's my understanding. So you're not allowed to eat 8 hours before the procedure. So for my sister, she couldn't eat anything that whole morning because it was scheduled at 12 noon, and then it got pushed back till 5 p.m. So she literally didn't get to eat or drink anything that whole day, which I think would be miserable. Whereas I had mine scheduled at 7 a.m. So I ate dinner the night before and then went to bed and then got up, had the procedure, and then I still got to eat breakfast basically at the normal time. So if you can get it earlier in the day, that's really nice. So it was scheduled for Monday morning. My hospital called me the night before or 2 nights before to give me all the lowdown. She told me to get there 2 hours early, which would be 5 a.m. And so that morning we woke up. You guys, having a scheduled C-section is a pretty chill experience. This being my first baby or babies, my main reference was from movies and TV shows where it's like your water breaks and everyone's chaotic and running around and you have to rush to the hospital and like you barely make it and then blah, 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 you give birth and it's a whole thing. So a scheduled C-section is not that way. You're typically not in labor yet. And it's calm, it's kind of zen. So we said goodbye to my mom, who was staying with us at the time, and my pets, and we just got in the car and quietly drove 12 minutes to the hospital, and we walked in at 5 a.m. The hospital was pretty chill and quiet, and so they just checked us in at reception. I think if you were in active labor, they would rush you right up to labor and delivery, and then later they would come and check you in and do all the insurance stuff. But since it was a scheduled C-section, they just checked us in, and it was just a very surreal moment because we were just small talking with this receptionist, and she was taking all our insurance information, and we were just talking about having babies in a couple hours, and it was just kind of crazy. So after we checked in, she brought us up to labor and delivery, and they immediately put me in a room. Labor and delivery was really calm at that time too. Most people were still asleep. And so, yeah, we just were put into a room. They gave me a hospital gown. You can obviously bring your own birthing gown if you prefer, but I just used the hospital gown. And they gave me some soap and asked me to take a shower. Now, I had taken a shower the night before, but I think this was special, like, antibacterial surgical soap. And it was weird. It was like red. So there was like blood. It looked like blood just like dripping down my body, but it was just soap. So I did that, and then I put on the surgical gown. So here is the first two, maybe obvious, but also I felt kind of stupid not knowing this. But anyway, first off, put the hospital gown on the traditional way with the ties in the back. That might seem like, no duh, but actually a lot of times when you go into a doctor's office and they give you one, they're like, it can go either way. And so for this surgery, you do want it the proper way with the ties in the back. And also you have to be completely nude underneath. And this is what I wasn't completely sure about. So I knew you weren't obviously supposed to wear any undies because that's the area that they're working with for a C-section. But I was kind of wondering if I was allowed to wear a bra, because you guys, if you are almost 9 months pregnant and so your boobs are gonna be quite large, especially if you were previously well endowed. And so going braless is not the most pleasant experience. It's not the most comfortable. And so I was just I was asking my husband, I was like, do you think I can just wear a bra? Like, they don't need that section during the C-section. And so I had to ask the stupid question to the nurse. And she was so nice and so understanding and didn't make me feel stupid. But she did say, no, you are supposed to take it off. So you are supposed to be totally naked underneath the hospital gown. Again, you might think that's duh, but I'm sure there's someone out there that maybe doesn't know that. So you don't have to ask that question. So anyway, once I was in the hospital gown, laid into the hospital bed, called the nurses with a little button. Immediately a bunch of nurses came in. They started asking me questions about the pregnancy, my medical history, allergies, all that kind of stuff. They did ask me some questions about birth plans, and if I had any preferences. Now, I didn't have super strong preferences with my birth plan. I did let them know, like, I would love to do skin to skin, as soon as possible. So here's another little tip for you. Hold your birth plan very loosely, ladies. I have watched so many videos of women that are so disappointed because, maybe skin to skin or, not getting an epidural or whatever, didn't work out, and they just felt like their entire birth experience was invalid or it was a disappointment. Please don't feel that way. Birth is so unpredictable. Yes, it is natural. I will give you that. Our bodies, yes, we're built to do that. But also, if you think about throughout history, how many millions, probably millions, thousands, millions of women who have passed away in childbirth because of complications. And so we are so blessed that with modern medicine, the mortality rate has gone down. It still is there, obviously, but it has gone down. And so if something has to change, they have to rush your baby to the NICU and you don't get to do skin to skin right away, or you do have to have an emergency C-section or something, please don't feel bad that your birth maybe didn't work out exactly how you planned. Yeah, you can be disappointed, but just hold everything loosely. And that's what I had to do too. And my nurses were so nice, but they did explain to me, especially with twins, a lot of times they do like to rush them. There's a room right next to the OR where they just like to assess them real quick and not clean them, because I know some women are like, don't bathe them, but just clear things off and check things, just because, with twins or triplets or whatever, a lot of times they are coming a little bit early, so they like to check on them and then they'll bring them back out to me. And so she explained that's probably what would be best and probably what will happen. And I said, that's fine. Whatever. I want my girls to be safe and healthy, and I want me to be safe and healthy. So yeah, do what you need to do. So she explained that. Then at some point the nursing shift changed, so those ladies all said bye and they were off to go home, and then a whole new set came in. They also did an NST, which is a non-stress test, if you don't know what that is. By now you probably have had some NSTs. It's basically a heart rate monitor for the babies and for mama. So there are 3 kind of disc monitors that they strap to your belly, and they try to find the heart rate of each baby. And then there's a little machine that's going beep, 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 measuring the heart rate. And then there's a third monitor that's actually for mama's contractions. And even if you're not in active labor, you are actually still having contractions, even if you don't feel them. So it's just monitoring those. Now, this was ever so slightly nerve-wracking because they couldn't really find the heart rate of my baby A, which it wasn't super scary because NSTs with multiples is always like, ugh. Because the monitors, a lot of times, both will pick up one baby's heart rate and the babies move and shift, so it's really hard for them to really measure accurately. And so it wasn't like super out of the ordinary that they couldn't find one, but it was just a little bit scary because it was like, I'm about to birth these babies. I hope that they're both okay. I think they got her heart rate a couple times, but they just couldn't like hang on to it. So they ended up keeping that monitor on basically till the very end, whereas they took baby B's monitor off and my contraction monitor off after just a little while. And then, you guys, it was time for the IV. Now, you might think I'm ridiculous and really a wimp for this, but honestly, out of the entire experience, probably the thing I was the most nervous about was the IV, and let me tell you why. So I have had IVs before. I don't like needles. Nobody likes needles, but I've had IVs. I can handle it. But I had never had an IV in my hand before, and I was under the understanding that for a surgical procedure like this, they have to put it in your hand. And I had always heard that IVs in your hand are so much more painful because you have so many nerve endings in your hand. And I previously, when I've gotten IVs, I've always like drank so much water and eaten food right before I gave blood and all that kind of stuff to like puff up my veins so it's easier. But because I couldn't drink or eat anything for 8 hours before my C-section, I was like, my veins are going to be so small, they're not going to be able to get it, all that kind of stuff. So I was really nervous. I did share that with the nurse, how nervous I was, which I think you should always be like honest with your medical staff, well, it's not staff, medical professionals. And so I told her I was really nervous. I asked if I could drink any water. They couldn't give me just a cup of water, but they could give me ice chips for some reason. So I scarfed those down really fast. And she was like, I'm going to try to put it in your arm right here because typically like you don't notice it as much, all that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay. And so my worst nightmare came true. She tried to put it here and she couldn't get it. And that has never happened before. They've always been like, oh, your veins are great. This is going to be easy. But she couldn't get it. And so she was like, I am so sorry, but I'm going to have to try again. And I think I'm going to have to put it in your hand. So she ended up putting it in this hand. It really wasn't that bad, you guys, if you're nervous about it. I mean, it's a needle going into your body. It doesn't feel great, but it really wasn't that bad. She did get it the first time in this hand. Yeah, the other thing about birth that I've now come to realize is it's true. You really forget a lot of the discomfort and you forget a lot of the pain, which is wonderful. But looking back, like I don't have like a traumatic, memory of getting the IV. Because now I have beautiful babies and like, who cares about a little IV? So the IV, I mean, it's not fun. I wouldn't recommend it for a good time, but it's not that bad. So then once she got that in, that was over with. And then it was time for the anesthesiologist to come in. So the anesthesiologist is the person who handles your pain management. So I'm going to try and explain this to the best of my abilities. And this is how he explained it to me. So there's two types of pain management. Obviously, if you're giving birth naturally, you can decide to not get, pain help, whatever. You can go totally natural and just handle it that way. Or you can get something called an epidural or a spinal. So an epidural is typically what you use if you are doing a natural birth. It is basically kind of like a sort of a big IV. Both a spinal and an epidural go in the same place. They go into the small of your back. But an epidural has like the tiny little tube, just like an IV does, so they can pump medicine in because typically labors last a while. And as your contractions get more painful, they can pump more medicine. So a spinal is typically what you get for a C-section, which is kind of just like a giant numbing shot. So it also goes into your back, but it just numbs you basically from like your waist down. My anesthesiologist said something about me getting a combination epidural and spinal. I don't know what that means. I definitely didn't have like a tube back there. It was just one shot. But I don't really know what a combination means. So if you know, you feel free to educate us because I don't really know. But it's basically I was getting a spinal. So he explained all of that, and then the nurses came in and said, hey, your doctor has just arrived. We're going to wheel you in. He wants us to wheel you in at 6:55. Remember, my surgery was scheduled for 7. I looked at the clock, and it was 6:45, so I had 10 more minutes. It was crazy because I remember the night before when we found out we were supposed to be there 2 hours early. My husband and I were like, what are we going to do for 2 hours? We're going to be so bored and so nervous. But no, it wasn't like that at all. We were so busy the entire time. It was like boom, 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 things happening the entire time. And so we had 10 minutes then. They gave my husband stuff he was supposed to wear. He had to wear a hairnet and shoe covering and this big like robe thing to go over his clothes. So they gave that to him. And then they kind of left us alone for those 10 minutes. So we just kind of sat there and talked to each other, and he was encouraging me and things like that. And yeah, they took a couple pictures right before they were to wheel me in, and then 6:55 came along, and it was time to wheel me in.